this passport that I was born with is the passport that I'm renouncing. I'm giving it up.
Meet Jet, a Malaysian who's been living in Singapore for 23 years. He switched from being a flight attendant at Singapore Airlines to a motivational speaker with impressive corporate contracts. We discussed his bittersweet journey to Singapore citizenship, why people get upset when comparing Malaysia and Singapore, and the most common challenges faced by Singaporeans. I'm Chernov, an entrepreneur and YouTuber. Let's go!
You're Singaporean now, right?
Yes, now I'm Singaporean. I got my PR very early on. When I came to Singapore, this was like I said in 2001, I was 21 years old. Within the first year, I applied for my PR and I got it already. And I didn't really know why I was applying for my PR back then. I just felt that, you know what, let's just apply. So I still remember I asked a couple of friends of mine who was working in the factory with me, and I said, you know what, I'm thinking of applying for PR. Would you like to follow me? Because I don't want to go alone. And this was back then in 2001, nothing was online. For us to apply a PR then, we had to go to ICA, pick up the physical forms, take it back with us, fill up those physical forms, get all the documentation ready, and then go back to ICA, submit the form. So I didn't want to do it alone. I invited two of my friends. One guy said, okay, let's just do it. The other guy said he didn't want to do it. That's how we applied for it. But of course, back then, application process was also a lot easier. And I think being a Malaysian, it's also a bit easier. Like I said, because culturally we are the same. So it's not so much of assimilating into a new culture. And there are a lot of Malaysians here in Singapore. Singapore, I think, I don't know, I like to think Singapore has a soft spot for us and they welcome us Malaysians with open arms. So, you know, within a year, I applied for it and I got it quite fast. I think in about three and a half months, I already received a letter that my application has been approved. That was one of the best decisions I ever did, till date. Because this was the big economic recession of 2001. A lot of companies were closing down. A lot of companies was moving out of Singapore. So there was mass retrenchments going on everywhere. I was one of those who was affected by the mass retrenchment because the factory that I was working for, the whole plant shut down. Everyone got laid off. Everyone got retrenched. And because this was happening all over Singapore, unemployment rates were high. Priority was given for locals to be hired, Singaporeans and permanent residents. If you're not a Singaporean or not a permanent resident at that point of time, chances are you're not going to get hired and you would have to go back. So remember I told you I invited two of my friends. One said no. That friend had to go back to Malaysia at that point of time because he could not stay in Singapore because there was no job. Whereas myself and the other friend, because we had our permanent residency approved, we were allowed to stay in Singapore and we were allowed to continue looking for jobs. After 8 months of looking for a job, I eventually managed to get a job with Singapore Airlines, and that's how I became a flight attendant for the next 7.5 years.
What was the reason you came to Singapore?
When I finished my diploma, and it was actually quite tough for me to get a job back in Malaysia. I went for a lot of interviews. I don't know whether it was an economy thing. I just couldn't find a proper job. The job that I was getting for at the factories, they weren't paying very high. They were telling me in the range of 500 to 600 ringgit. In today's exchange rate, that's less than 200 Singapore dollars a month. I looked at that kind of fees and I was like, man, if I work in Malaysia, I would still have to ask money from my dad. Took a loan from my dad, bought myself a bus ticket, just a one-way bus. So I took a bus. It was like a 10-hour journey. I took a bus. I came to Singapore. My cousin lives here and I bunked in with him. So I stayed with him and I was just going for interviews and just buying the newspapers every day, just circling where are the interviews, walk-in interviews, and I went there, and that's how I was here. And I eventually got a job. I got a job in Panasonic in Singapore, and I was there for about 1.5 years.
You got PR pretty quickly, and then you became a citizen.
Making that decision to really convert the citizenship was a little bit of a harder decision to make because both Singapore and Malaysia do not allow dual citizenship. And that was the challenge. It was not for a lack of love for Singapore, but it was more on that thought of giving up my birth citizenship. I was born in Malaysia, that was home for me. So there was this thought of, oh, am I a traitor to my country? Am I betraying my country? It's like my mom and dad are still Malaysian. So these were all the thoughts that was in my mind from when I was very young. Like I was in my early 20s, mid 20s, and I'm thinking about all this because I knew Singapore was home for me. Decision to give up the passport was a slightly more difficult decision to make. And that's why I was a PR for a long time. I was a PR for almost 15 years. But it was only at year 15 of being a PR when I was going to renew my PR for another 5 years. And this was in 2015, if I remember correctly. Yep, 15 years. And that was when I had to make the decision that, hey, you know what, just decide. If I'm going to go back to Malaysia, then go back to Malaysia. If I'm not going to go back to Malaysia, then just take up the citizenship because it makes more sense. And I knew deep down I was not going to go back and settle down. I love it there, but I knew this was home for me. After much thought, that's when I decided to apply for my citizenship. It took me about a year to get it approved from the time I put in the application, document submission, and then the interview. So it took me almost a year, and I think in 2016 was when I got my citizenship approved. Yeah, and that's it.
Do you remember your feelings when you get this passport?
In all honesty, it was bittersweet. Sweet because I've got my Singapore citizenship. It's nice. Been a PR for 15 years. Now I know that I'm Singaporean, so it's a very sweet feeling. Having a Singapore passport, really calling this place home, where I'm no longer on the fence. It was a very proud moment. And especially I remember going for the citizenship ceremony and collecting that certificate, saying the pledge, and it was a very proud moment. But bitter because it also meant, right, going to the Malaysian embassy, renouncing my citizenship. That was the reality. Like really coming to terms with reality that this passport that I was born with is the passport that I'm renouncing. I'm giving it up. So being at that embassy, being at the Malaysian embassy, filling up that form to renounce my citizenship, handing them back my passport, handing them back my national identification card, then to receive an official letter saying that I'm no longer a Malaysian. Yeah, that was quite tough.
What did your parents say?
No, I mean, they were very supportive. My mom and dad were very supportive. And they knew. I mean, I've been here for 15 years. They knew I was not going to move back. And like I said, because I think Malaysia and Singapore, it's very similar. Honestly, most people don't even see us different countries. A lot of Singaporeans have roots back in Malaysia as well. Because again, Singapore was part of Malaysia at one point of time. Well, my parents, for them, was not a big deal. And they could also see that I have been having a better life here than what I maybe could have had back home. Things was good here. I was at that time already running a business. I was in the midst of buying my own place. This was home, so they were very supportive. They weren't giving me a hard time like, oh, you're giving up your birth citizenship. No. They were very supportive of it. But I think internally, that was that heaviness that I was feeling. That, hey, after this, I'm no longer Malaysian. Because deep down, I still feel very Malaysian. I just came back from Malaysia yesterday because I was there for a speech and I was there. So, but even going back to Malaysia right now, it feels a bit weird because when I go back to Malaysia, right, naturally I'm moving towards the immigration queue that says for Malaysian passport. And then I have to remind myself, oh, I no longer have a Malaysian passport. I have a Singapore passport, which means I need to now go and queue up under international passport. So it feels very weird. Honestly, it's been 6 years now since I've been a Singaporean, but it still feels very weird for me whenever I go back to the Malaysian immigration.
I seen in the comments, when you start comparing Malaysia and Singapore, some people get angry. And they start like, oh no, like this is better, our food is better, this kind of thing. I feel there is a tension. What's the roots of this tension?
The divisiveness comes from, if you're a Malaysian who's never lived in Singapore, then you don't see what's good in Singapore and you're only looking at what's good in Malaysia. You will claim that everything is better in Malaysia. The food is better in Malaysia, the people is better in Malaysia, the states are better in Malaysia, the cities are better in Malaysia, because that really comes from that sense, that pride of nationalism. And Singaporeans are going to be the same. If you were born and bred in Singapore, having never had to leave Singapore to go and live in Malaysia, other than just traveling to Malaysia over the weekends and buying groceries and stuff like that, right? You are not really going to immerse yourself into the Malaysian culture. And then you are going to feel that everything in Singapore is better. People in Singapore is better, structure is better, systems are better, food is better. I'm a firm believer in traveling and traveling for long periods of time to different countries and immersing yourself into those countries so that you can really learn about the cultures of that country and see that country for what it is and how good it is. And different doesn't mean it's a competition. Different can be good. It could be good kind of difference in terms of people, culture, value, and beliefs that they have. And that way we can appreciate each other's countries for what it is, rather than trying to say, hey, you know what, my country is better than your country is worse than my country. I think it just causes more divisiveness. But yes, it's true, it happens in Singapore. I've got a lot of Singaporean friends who are very protective of their food, and the moment I tell them that, hey, you know what, certain things is actually better in Malaysia, because I've tasted both, and they'll be like, no, Singaporean food is still better. And I've got Malaysian friends, it's always like, how have you been in Singapore for 23 years? The food in Singapore isn't good. And I tell, no, Singapore food is quite good. And they're like, no, that means your tongue has changed.
Do you miss something from Malaysia? Do you miss something from home?
Yes. The food. And I come from the north of Malaysia. I was born in Penang and I grew up in Kedah. Penang food is the best. There's this dish, fried noodles, the mee goreng. When I first came to Singapore, this was one of the cultural shocks that I experienced when I went to the shop and I ordered a mee goreng, and the mee goreng came and it was red in color. And I was not used to this, because back in Penang, our mee goreng is not red in color. Our mee goreng is brown in color. It's dark brown. And I was looking at this and I was like, wow, what is this? And then I tasted it. Obviously, I didn't like it. I still don't like it until today, the red mee gorengs. But I've learned a workaround where now when I order a mee goreng, I tell them, please don't make it red. But these are the little things that I look forward to when I go back to Malaysia. Which is the food.
What's your favorite Singapore food, like from Singapore?
Nasi Padang. I love the Nasi Padang here. It's very different than the kind of Malay food that we get back in Malaysia. Slightly different style of cooking, because I think maybe there's more Indonesian influence closer to Singapore. So the style of Malay cooking here, it's more Indonesian influence. So I love the Nasi Padangs here. I have a friend of mine who was telling me the other day, why is it that Malaysians and Singaporeans only talk about food? I said, well, food is life for us. We culturally, we start planning for dinner while we're having breakfast. It's a norm. We're having breakfast and we're talking about, okay, what we're going to do for dinner tonight.
When you do public speaking, and you probably get a lot of feedback from the audience, what do you think the most common problem or challenge in life of Singaporeans?
We live in a very fast-paced society that in a way glorifies hustle and glorifies busyness. I feel as a society in Singapore, we can get too caught up in the busyness of life, which leads to a lot of stress. And I think that's why Singaporeans, we're actually quite on the edge. We are always on the edge, and we don't quite know how to just take it easy and chill and relax a little bit. So I feel that's a big issue actually, because it contributes to mental wellness and mental health. Mental wellness and mental health is a big thing, not just in Singapore right now, globally. It affects a lot of people. Stress affects a lot of people, and that leads to even depression and demotivation.
Listen, I have a problem. Maybe you can help me with that. Majority of my viewers watching this channel without subscription.
Okay.
Can you give them the small motivational speech that they need to subscribe to this channel?
My motivational speech for you guys is help us to help more people by subscribing to this channel, sharing these videos to the people who you really feel will benefit from it, and just continue supporting us. We feel motivated to keep going out and doing what we do.
100% agree. So you guys subscribe. What would be your advice, or maybe 3 action steps that people in the stress environment, like the feeling that the life is kind of passing by and they kind of not controlling their life, like what would be your maybe 3 steps that they can do today?
First and foremost, we have to take a break. We have to schedule time to really take a break from the busyness of life, because we can really get caught up into the busyness of life. There are 3 areas of relationship in all of our lives. There's people, possession, and thoughts. Unless we take a break from our natural environment, we may not even see how all of this has become a problem and how it has been stressing us out. One of the most important things and one of the most valuable things that we can do is to really take time off every year from the busyness of our normal environment. This me time is what's going to help you reset. When you take yourself out of your normal environment and put yourself in a new environment, when you come back to your normal environment, what's going to hit you right away is that you are suddenly going to see what are some of the things in your normal environment that is not working for you. Because we can get accustomed to toxicities in our life. Second thing, live in the present. Accept the present for what it is. When I say accept the present for what it is, we have to understand and we have to accept that, you know what, if life is stressful and we are feeling overwhelmed, we are feeling stressed, we are feeling that measure of burnt out, we need to know where to draw the line. But we can only do this if our mind is at the present, looking at the present for what it is. Instead of staying in the past and then like, oh man, maybe I should not have joined this job. Maybe I should not have done this. Maybe I should not have done that. Because maybe it doesn't change anything. The third thing is we really have to pay a lot of attention to our health and the habits that we create for healthy living. And healthy living is both mind and body. Healthy living doesn't just mean exercising every day for the body. But at the same time, we also have to look at what's going on in here. Meaning, do we have habits for a healthy mind? So I would say this would be the three things that I would advise people to look into. Schedule me time every year, for you to reset and recharge. Focus on the present, look at what's working, what's not working. Move away from what's toxic in your life. And the third thing, focus on healthy living, mind and body.
Condor or HDB?
HDB.
Petronas or MBS?
Oh, wow. MBS.
Chicken rice or nasi lemak?
Nasi lemak.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Max. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
YouTube thinks this is the best video for you. Watch it now. There is a high chance that you're gonna like it.